Y'all, if you've ever played Wizard101 before, you've probably taken the school quiz at the beginning of the game. You know the one I'm talking about, the one full of questions that have very little to do with how the game is played, and then it matches you with a school. I think that quiz is borderline bogus. So today, I thought we would answer the question, what does the school you play on Wiz say about your personality? Now, this is obviously way more subjective than the tier list vids I made for both PvP and PvE. However, I still think this is super valuable info that very few people are equipped with before they select their school at the beginning of the game. Starting off with Storm. Now, I think Storm is a very, very misleading school. A lot of people look at Storm and just think it's only about damage, but especially when you count the early game into the equation, I actually think the type of person that'll enjoy the Storm the most is the type of person that is fine with gambling. I think Storm is a gambler's school. And why do I say that? One, you have so many spells that do drastically different things depending on how lucky you are. There's some examples of this with like spells with a crazy range, like Storm Owl is a spell with the biggest damage range from low end versus high end, not to mention things like crit. But you also have spells like Insane Bolt that have backfiring ability. You have spells like Wild Bolt that can either screw you over or just completely win you the game on the spot. And early game, the crazy combination of the low accuracy of your spells and your low HP can really make a game completely shift, especially if you're soloing at a moment's notice. That is extremely frustrating if you're not the type of person that actually likes that type of stuff. So if you're someone that likes safe bets, consistent gameplay, this is not the school for you. If you want to put some pizzazz into every single game that you go into though, Storm is the one for you. Ice is a school that's highly known for its survivability, its tank ability, but in practice, I think it's really the school of hard work. I think if you're the type of person that is willing to work hard for an outcome, Ice is probably one of the most rewarding schools ever. And what do I mean by hard work? Really, when it comes down to the numbers, you're really gonna get to your victory, right? Your win condition by having the most number of steps out of any school involved. If you don't mind waiting a while, but having a feeling of like constant progress, I actually think Ice is a really good school. They have really high early game health, and also in PvP, they can actually tackle any challenge because of their tank ability. But it is not for people that are impatient. It's not really for people that can't wait for their goals to come to fruition. I think, to put it best, it's a school of delayed gratification, and that's just not for everybody. It's also weirdly bad at support, so it's actually a lot better suited for people that actually like to play alone. I think if you like to play with others, Ice is not the type of school that makes a big difference. I think it could do what any other school could do. It can like buff someone that's helping you, but there's nothing unique about Ice that lets it do it better. It's more about defense than anything, which is honestly, especially in PvE, way more suited just for people that want to play alone and can survive doing so. Now, the school quiz at the beginning of the game for Fire is maybe potentially one of the most atrocious things I've ever seen. It talks about being attractive, and that's why you're a Fire. Like, I'm not even joking. It's kind of crazy, but it also weirdly misses a very, very key aspect of Fire, which is the fact that you have to be patient. It's patient in the sense that the one thing that really makes you different from every other school is the fact that you have a lot of overtime, right? Whether we're talking about like triple dots or even simple dots like Fire Elf, right? These are really, really good. However, you have to be willing to basically not burst hit to do the most damage a Fire can do. I think it's a special type of patience, and especially when you consider spells that like detonate your overtimes and add damage, this is something way more relevant in PvP. I think you really got to get good at timing your offense. That's not really something you have to think about on schools like Storm or Death, which also have high damage. But I do think if you like Fire a lot, it does say a lot about the fact that you're willing to wait for the most damage, right? I think it's literally more damage output than Storm if you do the right things, but it's always just a little bit more delayed than Storm. Now, Death is one of those schools that gets a really, really weird rep in the game, mainly because of the plot surrounding Morgant and Malistaire. I feel like it's like looked at as like the dark school or the school of rebels or evil. I think there's a very simple way to characterize Death, and it's not something that a lot of people say. I just think Death is good if you like a well-rounded school. Now, why do I say this, right? Whenever the word well-rounded is brought up, a lot of people think balance, because balance takes a little bit from every school and builds a profile off of that. But in practice, I'd say that Death is the best in terms of being well-rounded. Why? Because they have a ton of universal buffs, right? This is just something that's really good for support. We're talking about Dark Pact, Curse, faint. But because you have drains, you also are able to solo really, really well. So it's good for people that are either introverted or extroverted. I don't think it's like necessarily for people that like to play alone or don't. And I can't really say that about any other school in the game. I think every other school, it's probably slightly better suited to either play alone or not. That is simply not one of those schools. They can literally just benefit from either situation. So I would say it's actually the most middle of the road school. If you don't want any crazy challenges, I think that is a perfect school for you, because you could either solo it or team up with someone very easily and do things that are unique. The life school. Now this one, I do think the school quiz, it pretty much covers it, so I'm not really gonna go too crazy. I think most people get what life's about. It's a healing school. You gotta be outgoing. You gotta be selfless. You gotta be willing to be in a support role. I think your sheer multitude of heals, like Satyr, like Regenerate, like Rebirth, right? These all shine when you have someone else doing the damage and you're the one keeping them alive. I think life is very, very self-explanatory. This is probably the only school where probably taking the school quiz and getting life probably means that the choice is kind of aligned a little bit. So good on Wiz for getting that right. They actually built a school around a personality type that actually makes sense. You could actually kind of make a quiz around it. Now the mid school. This is a very, very enigmatic school. And I think it's hard to put people that play the school into one category when it comes to their personality. But I would say that what really makes Myth unique is their ability to adapt to a situation. This isn't really something that really, you're not given that choice on most schools, right? If you get countered by some kind of mob or someone in PvP, you don't really have a lot of responsiveness. But especially in PvE, because you have spells that can go around shields and go around weaknesses, not to mention the early game, you know, impact of minions and even weird niche spells like Shift, you actually have a lot of things in your toolkit that can respond to a whole lot of threats. Earthquake as well. Its ability to remove blades is just a crazy thing in PvE that you just don't get that easily on any other school. There's an infinite blade and shield removal. I think Myth is absolutely great for people that are more introverted and are also just willing to, like, you know, build a deck around each encounter. I think Myth is super, super rewarding if you're willing to adapt to the changes around you each battle. This is the hardest one to put into one box, in my opinion. I actually think that Myth is almost as well-rounded as Death in a lot of ways. However, unlike Death, I would not ever really put it in a support role, so I do think it's a very key distinction. And finally, balance. Now, the biggest myth that this game has ever peddled to the player is that balance is the school of being well-rounded. And you know where they get that, right? Balance has a lot of hits that do things that involve other schools, right? We got scales, we got, like, you know, more OG spells like, I don't know, Spectral Blast and, like, I guess Gaze and Chimera. Sure, you have spells that could use other schools. That being said, you have the weakest buffs in the game. Even though they're universal, it's the weakest buff. And even though you can learn Balance Prism a little bit earlier than before, in my previous video where I ranked schools, people were like, yo, you forgot about the level 50 Prism. Sure, at level 50 you could Balance Prism. That being said, that doesn't make the game any less hard early game. I think the type of person to pick Balance is absolutely the one that doesn't mind challenges. I think Balance in PvE anyways has easily the highest skill ceiling. I don't recommend Balance ever for the first playthrough, but if you want a real challenge, I'd say Balance is one of the only schools that's extremely unique, especially if you're solo PvEing throughout the entire game. Hopefully, if you're the type of person to pick a school based on personality rather than something more quantitative like how they do in PvP or, you know, just their stats on, like, you know, paper. I've always wanted to see a new quiz for Wiz, so I'd love to see y'all's thoughts on the school quiz as it is now and how they can make it better, so maybe some of your actual, like, traits kind of carry over into the way you play the game. I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. Obviously, this was some hot takes, so let me know what y'all agree on, what y'all disagree on. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon, and yeah.